Hello, this is Dread from Epic Builds. In today's video topic, we're going to go over my full build guide for Forge Guard Minion Warpath. So this build is designed around the interaction between Warpath summoning your Forge minions for you and, of course, Void Cleave. Now, what's going on here? So if you don't know, forged weapons are minions that use your main hand or your weapons to scale the damage. So for instance, your melee flat on your weapon is applied to your minions, and so and so. So are all the other stats, so including the crit chance and the attack speed. So how we're scaling damage is we're using an Odachi with crit chance, attack speed, increased melee minion damage, and armor shred. And this allows us to do an insane amount of single target versus enemies. Now, the reason why we're not flat is because Void Cleave gives us a 75 flat minion added damage buff for us as a buff that stacks as well. You can use it multiple times, go up to 150 to 225 if you use Void Cleave. And why we're running crit chance on our weapon is so that when we Void Cleave, we actually apply 3 stacks of crit vulnerability, meaning it raises our base crit up all the way to 20%. This is by far one of the best ways of critting reliably as a minion Forge Guard build. Otherwise, you don't necessarily have the best way of critting as a minion Forge Guard build. And why that's so strong is because normally these builds you don't crit. Now, it also helps that the Dachi has a 170% increased melee critical strike multiplier, which is absolutely insane. Allows you to scale crit to the roof, and as you can tell, single target is really strong. Now there is a node after the fire damage one. Can't really you can use it, but the issue is what happens is so what it does is it increases the effect of the buff by 150%. So it's insane, right? You go up to 200 melee fire flat. The issue is you you have to directly hit the minion. Now this is very strong for something like Manifest Armor, allowing you to hit really hard, while with like uh with the void with the weapons, the issue is um it's really hard in the thick of battle to hit all your minions, and I'd rather just have the consistency of hitting an enemy, right? But other things with the build, we're running a Manifest Armor setup, as we want Manifest Armor to be very a consistent minion. Because one issue right now, especially with the Chapter 9 mobs, if you did not know, they're severely overtuned and insanely strong. The Chapter 9 mobs in Monolith, they scale insanely hard. A lot of the footage you'll probably see me almost dying to a lot of them in like empowered monoliths. That's not because the build is bad, that is because Chapter 9 is ridiculous. Hopefully, it will get nerfed eventually. Now, our minions die a lot. Forged minions are not the tankiest thing in the world. Even after running some minion health regen and a Ribbons of Blood so they can't get crit and they can also leech an insane amount of increased health, they still die sometimes. And that's because partly because Chapter 8 and partly because sometimes you just have a lot of enemies hitting the same mob and eventually one of your minions will die. And you're not necessarily summoning them the fastest way possible with the way Warpath works with forged minions. So that's why we're running Manifest Armor, as it gives us kind of a solid rock to fall back on, because if you did not know, Manifest Armor is one of the tankiest minions in the game. So, like I said, if the last thing that will die in your arsenal is going to be Manifest Armor. So it allows you to have a consistent minion so that even if you're out of forged minions, you can still do damage with Manifest Armor. But with that being said, let's get into the build, shall we? Here we are in game with the build here. The name is Rip Vulcanus 2021. Moment of silence for fallen brethren. Now, so there's been a few changes this patch. Mainly, poison res is a lot more important, so I'd heavily suggest getting poison. If you watch the first video, you'll understand how the build works. But if not, so the way it works is we're running Warpath. We're just gonna get the skills here. We take 2 points travel into Unchained, giving us -4 mana cost for Warpath because it starts at 10. Then we grab 1 node into Reckless Spin, so that'll bring us to 10 negative Warpath, meaning we're at free Warpath. Now, the issue is we're getting negative 30%. This used to be take 30% increased elemental damage taken, which stacked on top of everything else. That was much worse than this. This is just a flat negative, meaning if I'm at this much res, right? When I'm warpathing, I'm a little bit less. It's nothing crazy, right? So much better. So now you can get it to 0 mana cost warpath much easier. And of course, we take 2 points travel into Molten Path, 2 points travel into Way of the Executioner because we're not dealing damage, 1 point into Forge Master stance. Now, while spinning, you summon Forged weapons every 5 seconds if you hit an enemy Forge Strike. So spin for a few seconds here. There you go. That's a Forged minion. They go and they attack. They're really cool minions. Scale off your attack, right? I'll get into that later. But we also run this node 5 points in. While spinning, you summon Forged weapons frequently. So pretty much when I'm spinning, I summon them more frequently. So until they pop out more, right? So I have more. There's a max of 12, which you want to build, which you do get to all the time with this build. Then 1 point travel into Iron Reach, 2 points travel into Whirling Steel, 1 point into Battlemaster's Blade travel, and then 2 points in Dark Nexus. Why are we running Dark Nexus? Well, there are a lot of skills that we're using, like for instance, Ring of Shields. We're also using Void Cleave as well as we're pathing around, meaning that we actually do suck up a little bit of mana, so we need this for a little bit of sustain. And of course, for the last few points, we run Quicksilver Wind. As you can tell, Warpath is not dealing damage. It is just simply a utility skill, and it's how we're summoning our minions, right? Now, Void Cleave. We take 1 point travel into Rift Flame, 1 point into Hellish Chasm, which turns Void Cleave into fire, right? Then 5 points into Molten Blades, which gives us 75 minion flat fire, which is absolutely insane. So, I'll show you here. The minion is doing 2,000, right? Now it's doing like 12,000 crits. That's all you see. And it's absolutely insane. Then we take 2 points travel into the depths, then 1 point travel into precognition, 3 points into rift. So crit vulnerability applies 15% base crit, right? Is really strong for us because it allows us to get 20% base crit, and it allows us to actually scale crit on our weapon and actually crit with our things. Now the thing is, since Void Cleave has a 2.3 second cooldown with the setup, right? You can actually stack 6 stacks of crit vulnerability, which allows us to crit all the time. Insanely strong. Then 3 points into Dark Pathway for increased cooldown recovery speed, so you can spam it more. Then 4 points into Fraying Strikes, which turns into Fire Shred thanks to Hellish Chasm. And a lot of our damage is fire, so we actually benefit from this. Now, Forge Strike, we take 4 points travel, 4 points into Forged by Fire, Melee Fire, 4 points into Well-Forged Weapons, so it lasts longer and we get +4. In this patch, they made it so that Forged Weapons are capped, summons you can have, so you go from, now you can start with 6, this gives you +4, and on the tree you can get +2. So you can get 12 total, strong. 1 point into Forge Master, so sometimes when you're spinning, it will convert it into Great Axe. Pretty much it just gives it a little bit more AoE. Not enough AoE for you to feel good, but like enough for it to be useful. Then of course, 4 points into Light Forge for Forge weapon attack speed, which actually is new. Then of course 5 points into Heavy Strike, which applies to our forged weapons as well. So you get increased hit damage, more hit damage, and then increased stun chance. Then for the last 2 notes, we grab Arcane Welding for this ward whenever create a forged weapon, which isn't that often. There's literally nothing else to use in the tree because we actually have this off our bar because this affects our forged minions while also not being, on our bar, which is like fine because we actually don't use it. We just use Warpath to summon them because it's much more efficient, right? Then for Manifest Armor, this is your stereotypical Manifest Armor. The main thing you need to know is that we're using stats from boots, gloves, and helms and all that to scale minion health regen so that our Manifest Armor never dies. It also does a decent amount of single target as well, which is nice, right? But pretty much it's just an extra minion. So we go from 12 to 13. But said, it's very reliable. It never dies most of the time. And it's very strong because of that. And it does a lot of damage too if you actually scale it properly. Now, the next skill is Ring of Shields. This is your stereotypical defensive ring of shield setup. The main thing you need to know about this is that the shields, since we're scaling minion health, they actually block a lot of hits, meaning projectiles don't hit us as often. Since we're not playing something like block or something, we need an extra layer of defense. We also get a bunch of healing thanks to it, because since we're not actually dealing damage ourselves, we can't rely upon leech to be a sustainable source of sustain. So we use that in combination with health regen to sustain the build. That's pretty much it for the skills. We're going to talk about the passives. We take 2 points travel into Juggernaut, 8 points into Fearless for the health and the health regen, because we're actually building health regen for once, so vitality and health regen is insane for us. 5 points into Armor Clad, so we get 10 damage taken from enemies. Warpathing, you're usually nearby enemies anyways. 5 points into Valiant Charge, this is new. We get health and increase its cooldown with movement skills. Void Cleave counts as a movement skill because you move with it, even though it's utility, so it actually gives us cooldown. Very nice. 3 points in Axe Thrower. I'll explain why we grabbed this in a bit. Then we take 10 points into Abyssal Endurance for the free void and physical res, helps us cap our res. HP is very important on this build, as I'll explain why in a bit. And then, of course, for Paladin, 8 points into Defiance for the attunement. Attunement does scale the damage of our minions, so it's actually good to grab it. And then, of course, Elemental Res is always good to grab. 7 points to Devour for a lot of HP. And then 7 points to Simple for the res and the HP. So we get chonkier and chonkier. Now, Forge Guard, this is where it's important. 8 points into Battle Harden, 1 point travel into Weapons Master, 1 point travel into Peltast, 4 points into Shield Breaker. So, this node here, Axe Thrower, it throws an axe at an enemy. I don't believe it throws an axe at the actual dummy, but it does against enemies, right? Why that's important is because this axe, it applies physical shred and fire shred stacks. As you know, this build does mainly physical and fire damage. So this is a lot of damage and allows our Warpath to actually be useful and shred enemies so that we deal more damage, and it's really strong for bosses, mainly rares. 5 points in Hammer and Anvil. Now, Hammer and Anvil, pretty much all you need to know is as long as you don't use a throwing skill, you take 25% less damage, but then you deal 25% less damage. Since you are a minion build and you're using minions to deal damage, this 25% less damage is completely meaningless, so it's just 25% DR on top of everything else. Really good. 10 points into Folded Steel for belly flat with forged weapons and manifest armor, and you can also get +2 forged weapons as well, bringing us to 12. 6 points into Might, health. You want as much health as possible, so scaling. Then 5 points into Infinite Bulwark or armor, increased chance to find potion on use, which is a lot stronger this patch, thank you, because of cleanse ailments on potion use. Really strong mod, so having chance to find potion somewhere is really good now. And then 5 points into Liquid Iron later on, so we take less damage over time taken. If you did not know, poison res is big because poison damage is big. There's also a lot of new mobs from Chapter 9 that deal a lot of damage over time, stuff that doesn't really necessarily get mitigated by our other sources. So having 30% less damage over time taken is very good for us. Eventually you'll want that. That's pretty much it for the passives. Now for the gearing, the most important part is the weapon. Now the weapon. We have increased melee attack speed. since we have a lot of flat from all these different sources, including Void Cleave, we want as much attack speed as possible so that our weapons are doing faster attacks. Because if you did not know, it takes the attack rate of the weapon, right? It'll attack faster thanks to a faster weapon. So, for instance, if I off, right, I summon a new Forge minion, that one will attack a lot slower, right? Now, we also get chance shred, armor, and hit, since a lot of our damage is hit based. This shred on armor and hit, and since we have like 20 plus 13 plus minions always, this is a lot of armor shred and allows us to reach the armor shred cap if you have T5 of it. So it's actually just like 60% more damage usually, most of the time. The increased melee damage, that's really strong because it's like melee damage for minions, so scales are fire damage and our fizz damage at the same time. 5 of that. I got a pretty decent sword. You can obviously get better, but this is pretty. Obviously, it's on a dachi. It's a sword. We have to use a two-handed sword or an axe. That's the issue with the build. Using Void Cleave, right? Void Cleave requires an axe or a sword, two-handed, right? We can't play it with anything else, meaning we have to two-handed axe or sword. So Adachi actually becomes our best in slot thanks to the critical strike multiplier and the attack, and not that bad physical damage. But like I said, we get melee physical damage from everything else, so we're fine. Helmet, manifest armor level, so that you have more critical avoidance on the helm. Vitality, health regen, just a lot of health regen. Amulet, minion health, minion damage. Minion health is more important than damage, but damage you need a lot as well. Frailty, so your Warpath applies frailty. Poison res. So poison res, we need poison res. So get poison res. Chest. This is supposed to be a Wings of Argentus, but if you know me and my luck, you know damn good and well that it did not drop a Wings of Argentus. So to what you run instead of a Wings of Argentus until this point is you run Warpath levels for increased melee damage for your manifest armor, because it actually takes this increased melee damage. Vitality, increased health, and health regen. That's what you run until you get manifest. Until you get Wings of Argentus, which will gives 40% reduced damage taken while moving, which is very strong for us. And for a belt, cleanse, minion health regen. Minion health regen made the build feel a lot better in endgame. I would very suggest getting some minion health regen. Health regen for the belt, force endurance. For this ring, this is the only required unique quote unquote for the build. You can get it from farming the Abomination from all the outcasts. You can farm 58 if you want. Care. I got it from powered because you have a higher chance of dropping it from powered. But obviously, if you don't feel strong enough, you can always farm it for the 58 one. Pretty much what this does is it makes it so our minions, since we're doing melee damage with minions, this makes it so that they leech their damage, so that they actually get some sustain, because otherwise they have no sustain. And then gives us leech rate, which is strong for their leech. And then it also makes it so that our minions cannot be crit. This is very strong because in powered monoliths, you're stacking a lot of crit modifiers because you have crit avoidance, and your minions having crit avoidance means that they die a lot less. Ribbons of Blood is definitely the best item of the build, and definitely 100% needed later on. You don't need it until like in powered monoliths, but you get into powered monoliths, this should be the first thing to farm, like I did. Ring, health, damage, res, health regen. You want a silver ring because you want to be fast. Because since you're always warpathing, you always need movement speed. Gloves. This is supposed to be minion damage, minion health, health regen. Very simple. Vitality, it's supposed to be movement speed or minion health regen, either way. Health regen. This is supposed to be, I think, minion. I don't think you can run minion health. So yeah, just run attunement, minion damage, health, and health regen. One thing that is supposed to be endurance until you get the endurance blessing. But yeah, it's like I'm ruining health because eventually I'm going to go and get the endurance blessing from Spirits of Fire. There will be a finished planner in the description as well if you want to see what to actually go for in the end. But yeah, that's it. And then for idols, literally increased health, increased HP, flat HP, right? You want as many of these as possible. And of course, I'm using some to like cap my reses because none of Sentinel's idols help your minions. So you might as well be as tanky as possible. The reason why we're able to get away with running so much health regen on our gear, right, is because it's because health regen takes all the slots of like health. So for instance, we're not running hybrid on the belt, not running hybrid on the boots, not running hybrid on the weapon. We're not running increased health here, right? Which means we have to get our percentage HP elsewhere. So we get it all from our items. Hybrid HP idols, very strong. And then we also grab a little bit of like res idols to just cap our res everywhere. Get like poison res mainly, health regen and poison res. Those are like the more important parts. And then of course get a little bit of Ellie res here and there, HP. Just mess around. Your idols are actually the most flexible spot, so you can just like mess around with them until you feel comfortable. All right, and that's pretty much it for the build. Like you said, chapter 9 mobs are very strong. They're very annoying. Hopefully they get hot fixed eventually so they don't deal so much damage, and you'll do just fine with this build. That being said, thank you all for watching. Have a wonderful rest of the day wherever you're at, and bye.